That's me, graduating with a master's degree from the University of Colorado's School of Journalism in 2008. And that's Paul Vogts, professor and dean of the school.
It's been another terrific year for the school. Students are still applying to get in far greater numbers than we can accept. We're still in the top 3 most popular majors on campus.
Our speaker was John Temple, the editor and publisher of the Rocky Mountain News.
I need you to succeed. Our society needs you to succeed. Nothing is more important to our democracy than a free flow of information. And that is your job in a variety of forms and a variety of shapes. The reality of a professional in the media and communication world, it's not about us. It's about the world and about the world that we're trying to convey and communicate to others. So the focus shouldn't be on us.
There comes a time when every keynote speaker has to give his sunny prediction for the graduate's future. I knew that in the spring of 2008 that wasn't going to be easy, but this seemed to fall a bit short of being completely convincing.
That is your future. Frankly, I'm envious looking out on this crowd. It doesn't mean that your future is going to be easy. It definitely won't be. But if you take the values you've learned here, and if you build on them with your hunger to make a mark, to make a difference, I truly believe that your future in the media world will be bright. I'm not one of those people who does not believe that I believe the future is actually brighter. It's different.
Maybe he knew something we didn't.
So we're in this beautiful, amazing place tonight. We have this pool to ourselves, this tropical, beautiful patio with all these flowering trees. It's just amazing.
Here we are.
And this is mi esposo.
So you ready to do this?
Sí.
Deb and I are in Santa Rosalia in central Baja Sur. And we're in this really nice hotel overlooking the ocean and bougainvilleas and what other kinds of trees?
I think mimosa, there might be some jasmine.
All kinds of
It's just amazing.
exotic flowering trees around
Coconut
us. It's
palms and...
nice. So the reason we're staying here is, and kind of splurging a little bit, is we had an interesting adventure today. We were driving down Highway 1 and we came up over this rise and there was a woman standing in the middle of the road, bloody on her face and her hands, waving her arms. So we stopped.
Yeah.
And she looked really distraught. She seemed very overwhelmed. And
she spoke English, not Spanish.
Yeah. She told us that she had just been in a fight with her husband who had attacked her with a hammer and sprayed something on her. And she jumped out of the car to escape and ran through the desert. And so this other van pulled up and it was Mexicans, and they said they were full too. We couldn't take her in our car because it was full. And so they went and they said they're going to go to the next military checkpoint and bring back some militar, some soldiers.
Yeah.
So they left, and about a half hour later, this Ford Escape, a little SUV, followed by a Humvee with maybe, I don't know, a dozen soldiers in it, all in full combat gear, M16s, everything. And then a darkly tinted Suburban with 6 very exotic looking antennas sticking out of its roof pulls up, and all these soldiers just, they all pull up next to us and they all jump out and run into the desert, and the whole platoon assumes a defensive formation around us.
Yeah.
And then this 3-star general gets out of the Suburban and comes up to us, and he speaks a little bit of English. I'm the only one there who speaks any Spanish.
Well, Spanish and English.
Yeah, Spanish and English. And so he wants to know what's happening, and so I'm translating. Meanwhile, the husband, he's the one in the Ford Escape, and he looks even worse than she does. His whole face and upper chest is just covered in blood. And he's really emotional, almost hysterical too. And he's telling a different story, that she attacked him from the back seat and tried to kill him with a hammer. and tried to kill him, and out in the middle of the desert. Meanwhile, I'm translating all this for the soldiers, and they call the municipal police, and they show up, and I'm just really worried we're gonna get drawn into this whole thing, and it was really stressful because when we first drove up, I didn't know if this was some kind of trick or ambush or.
We were with other people who are hiding out in the desert just beyond the bounds of the road, and all of a sudden they all come and ambush us.
So they eventually, the police took her away, and the 3-star general and his platoon of heavily armed, machine gun clad soldiers went with them, and the police handcuffed the woman and took her and the man away in separate cars.
Yeah.
And luckily, we were able to just kind of
drive away.
So, interesting day. So that was our adventure. We happened on what seems like was an attempted murder out in the middle of the desert, and a wife trying to kill her husband, or a husband trying to kill his wife.
Yeah.
And we just drove right into the middle of it, and got a 3-star general involved, and had a bunch of machine guns around us, and some people covered in blood, but we got away fine.
Once we made it to La Paz, near the southern tip of Baja, we were delayed by a hurricane which shut down the ferry to Mazatlan until the storm had passed. This was alright by my wife, who then happened to have a crippling case of Montezuma's revenge. But when I told her what an opportunity it would be to shoot some footage of an actual hurricane, she reluctantly agreed to come along.
2007 marks the first year that 2 Category 5 hurricanes have come ashore in the same year. Right now, the second of those hurricanes is currently battering Central America and the Yucatan Peninsula. At the same time, Hurricane Henriette has come ashore here in Baja, California on the west coast of Mexico. Seeing these kinds of conditions helps me realize just what a narrow band of conditions are suitable for human habitation. Too little water in the form of drought that is currently facing the American Southwest can be just as deadly as too much water in too little time. The threat of global climate change is that these kinds of extremes in climate will become more frequent and more widespread. One more?
In order to jump through one last academic hoop and get that piece of paper that said diploma on it, I was required to make a documentary. So my wife and I packed up our car, put our belongings in storage, and started driving from Boulder to Mexico, down through Baja California, and eventually to Belize, and finally into the jungles of Guatemala. When we got back, I cut a video that tried to conform to these rules by first, keeping myself out of the story as much as possible. And second, by presenting both sides of each story, ideally by quoting authoritative figures, I would then be on my way to fulfilling what I was told should be my objective of objectivity. But that wasn't the movie I originally set out to make.
Today is September 11th, 2007, and we're in Sinaloa State, in Mexico, not far outside of Mazatlan, and we're driving up to a place called Concordia, which is on the way up to Durango. Yesterday on the news, there was a little bit south of here, down in Oaxaca State,
Based on this, we decided to head south along the Pacific Coast Highway before heading inland to look further into these bombings. I had wanted to head down to southern Mexico and then further into Central America anyway, and this seemed as good a reason as any to set out. I knew that the movie I wanted to make had to be about global climate change, but of course I had no way of predicting what the weather would do. So I figured I better have a plan B, in case I couldn't find enough footage of climate change to make a movie. That was part of the original motivation for starting to look around Sinaloa and the infamous Golden Triangle, home to much of Mexico's heroin production and one of its most brutal cartels. As further news reports came out, it turned out that the natural gas pipelines that had been bombed were in central Mexico, but that the group responsible for them, the EPR, a Spanish acronym for the Popular Revolutionary Army, was from Oaxaca state in the south. According to mainstream media reports, this group was nothing more than one extended family that was apparently really disgruntled. Nonetheless, the Mexican government had decided to send in the army. Even these fragmentary pieces of information were enough to arouse my interest because it was so obvious that someone wasn't telling the truth, which often meant that somebody was trying to cover something up. Before we left, I'd done some reading about a guerrilla army in the south called the Zapatistas. Were led by a charismatic figure named Subcomandante Marcos, who apparently used to be a philosophy professor before heading out into the jungle and disappearing. This social ferment and upheaval were enough to draw me in to have a closer look. About 10 years later, he showed back up as a leader in an indigenous army that in 1994 briefly took over San Cristobal de las Casas, the capital of the state of Chiapas. Soon after melting back into the jungle, the Zapatistas, as the EZLN is sometimes known, became the first people's movement to begin taking advantage of the newly available technology of the internet. For me, finding what's real in people's lives has ironically always involved a lot of feel and intuition. But when you do get there, that place where you know people are telling you their truth, you can almost always tell. As we began to climb from the Pacific coast for the southern highlands of Oaxaca, I began to see more EPR and EZLN signs over roads that extended hundreds of miles to the capital. Once inside the city, the police helicopters buzzing overhead almost immediately made their presence known, as well as police paramilitaries cruising in pickup trucks. Despite this, there was also increasingly evident a graffiti campaign of defiance and resistance, some of it quite good, the product of what appeared to be in part a stenciling process. The graffiti was nearly everywhere, by now a confirmation that far from being the work of one family, this was more akin to a general insurrection. I couldn't help but think, now this is fighting for your art, when men with rifles were hunting you from helicopters. Soon, though, it became clear that beside the graffiti aspect, this regime was exercising the characteristic of all repressive regimes, which is to try to censor information that it deems outside its orthodoxy, and thus dangerously free. At the centuries-old government palace, resistance grew to the point where the much-hated government of Ulysses Ruiz, or Uro, had to flee to a gated enclave in a more remote location, much like a mafia family from a bygone era, hunkering down while under siege. Though the government was once again hastily asserting its presence and authority. So these are grasshoppers that we're buying here, that we're about to eat. We just bought a bag. But we're gonna go back, we're gonna have a little salt and grasshoppers. Yep. There you go. Alright. So you ready for this? Yeah. Okay, gracias. We're in southern Mexico, in Oaxaca, and we have a special Oaxacan meal planned. We're starting with a little bit of beer here. And we've got lime for it as well, which we've already poured in. And then when we get ourselves fortified with enough beer, we have some authentic mezcal, complete with, I don't know if you can see this or not, the worm in the bottom of the bottle, and some salt to go with it. And as our pièce de résistance, we have a Oaxacan delicacy of grasshoppers, which Deb is going to eat.
These ones are lemon and salt flavored. So let's see. They had, what else? They had garlic and then they had red pepper flavored. We You chose the lemon and salt. Yes.
So, I've tried mezcal. This is one of the things about going into a store here where they sell mezcal, is they give you like free little half shots, and they have about 20 different flavors of this stuff, and so you can they'll let you try them all.
Yeah.
So you can get like 10 shots of various flavored mezcal just for browsing. You don't even have to buy anything, and you can come out of a store without having bought anything basically loaded. So
the salt actually, the worm in the bottom, when it's dry, it's actually crushed to make this salt. So that's part of the
so it's special
whole,
salt.
Yeah.
Special worm salt, which Deb asked especially for, because she needs
Me being the vegetarian.
So we checked on the internet how to drink mezcal because we didn't know before, and it says you can drink it basically just like a tequila shot. So I'm gonna drink it just like a tequila shot. So lick the hand
I don't know about this salt.
and pour a little salt on there. So lick the and then
Just a tiny bit.
we should have a toast. Here is to our Mexican adventure, our odyssey.
Okay.
You ready for this? On the
Yeah.
count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
Ugh.
Personally, I think mezcal has kind
Oh God.
has kind of a medicinal flavor to it. Myself, I need to help that along with a little beer. Oh, you didn't drink yours?
I did. I had a little sip. I didn't do the whole shot thing. I don't want to get sick here.
Okay, so
What'd you think of that salt?
tasted salty. So now we're gonna try. Can you see that? Yeah, let me try.
But I
this.
think the guts have been taken out.
Oh yeah, they've had their digestive materials taken out
Yeah. And then dried.
and then dried. I don't know how you take the digestive materials out of a grasshopper, but they're very clearly grasshoppers here.
And they sell
you
these
go.
in big, huge bowls.
Okay.
Oh God. So gross.
Okay.
And she wanted to sell us like 2 cupfuls. Like, whew. I don't know if I can do this.
Here we got it. Here we go.
You go first.
Okay, so here's my very first grasshopper
Oh.
on the count of 3. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Salty. You can taste the lemon. They're really light. They're light. I mean, they're like hold on a sec. They're like Fritos, you know, like corn chips. You know, they're very light, except for the legs, which are you chew them for a while and they're still legs. You can tell.
Should I rip off the legs?
No, they're good.
So you gonna have another one?
You're next. Okay, here you go. Pick a nice one.
I want a little one because you took a little one.
No, I didn't. I took a big one.
No, I think it was little. Oh, I can't see
Just
their
take this one.
eyes. No, that's too big. God, I can't believe I'm doing this. Was it really gross?
No, it's fine. Just have your beer close by. But chew it enough to get the full flavor, Deb.
Okay, this is the one I'm doing. Poor little guy. Okay. I gotta close my eyes to do this, so.
Let's see the whole effect there.
Okay. Alright. Okay, you're gonna count down for me, right?
Okay. 1, 2. You're ready to do this, right?
Oh, God. I think so.
Okay.
You did it.
I'll do it on 3. Ready?
Okay.
1, 2.
I feel like you're gonna gag.
No, it was fine. It wasn't bad at all, really. Seriously, I'll have another one.
Okay. Okay, here we go.
1. Show the camera just to make sure that they know that you have it.
This isn't the guy I'm eating. Or the gal, whatever it is.
1, 2,
I can't believe this.
3.
God.
What do you think?
Ugh. It's the thought of it is worse than the actual doing of it.
It's a delicacy, though, you know?
I know, but it's not for me.
It's good stuff, though.
Oh.
Here, let me help you along a little bit.
Okay, that's
A little
it
bit
for
more
me.
mezcal. Well, we hope you've enjoyed sharing our Oaxacan feast
Yes.
of Mexican beer with lime, of course, and mezcal complete with worm,
Oro
the Oaxaca.
de Oaxaca. So
Oaxacan gold, yeah.
Yeah.
And the pièce de résistance, grasshoppers. All right,
Okay.
cheers.
Salud.
We were finally succeeding in introducing ourselves to the culture, but to really begin to see which way the political and social winds were blowing, I thought it was time we got out and talked with some people in the street. So this is October 1, 2007, and we're in the central square, the Zocalo of Oaxaca City, Mexico. This is a pro-democracy demonstration. It's fairly large, although I was just talking to one person and he said this is small compared to demonstrations that have occurred in the past, which have spilled out into another 4 or 5 blocks. It's very peaceful so far, but in the city around the central square here, you see heavily armed police units, usually traveling in pickup trucks, half dozen to a dozen police sitting in the back of the pickup truck, almost all heavily armed, carrying M16s, machine guns, often wearing combat helmets and flak jackets. So there's definitely an air of intimidation, but so far things have gone pretty peacefully. Primarily, this is against the state government here in Oaxaca, which is pre-PRI, the party that's been in power for the last 70 years. And the governor, his name is Ulysses Ruiz, and I guess he's pretty universally hated in these parts, and part of the demonstration is to try and get him out of government. But he's very firmly ensconced with the support of the Mexican president. His name is Calderon. In Mexico, being a gringo over 6 feet tall with blonde hair sometimes made it difficult to interview people, as they naturally wondered who I was and what my intentions were. So it came as a pleasant surprise when I found one woman who was not only willing to discuss the touchy subject of politics, but said she would talk on camera.
Bueno, yo soy hija de Meterio Marino Cruz. Él fue golpeado el día 16 de julio. A él lo golpean policías al servicio de URO. Él en este momento su vida ha cambiado demasiado.
As soon as I saw it, I recognized it. That look of pain and a suffering that's still alive. And suffering that still lives is because it's either fresh or it's because it hasn't found its catharsis and resolution yet. I could immediately tell that far from being spin, she was telling me her individual, personal truth.
Eso es lo que el gobierno hace cuando alguien aquí en Oaxaca alza la voz. Y aquí se ve que en Oaxaca no todo está resuelto. Entonces, ¿quién no va a regresar eso? ¿El gobierno? Claro que no, ni lo va a hacer. A él que le interesa lo que nos pase. Solamente manda a golpear y a matar y a encarcelar para que nos callemos la voz.
When I got back to the hotel, I did a search for her father's name. I soon found his story. Apparently, he had been part of a teacher's strike that the government had crushed by force. His skull was broken, resulting in brain damage. He was then taken into custody by the military, where he was tortured for several more days before his body was dumped and left for dead. Miraculously, he somehow survived.
Porque mi mamá es maestra y también nos afecta a todos. Como ustedes saben, Oaxaca es uno de los estados donde las personas son pobres. Porque como todos sabemos, en Oaxaca la situación se está viviendo es muy dura y todo viene del gobierno. Y no solo de Luis Ortiz, sino también de Felipe Calderón. Y se ve, sabemos que esta lucha no es fácil, ni ha sido fácil, pero la vamos a ganar.
As is often the case, those in positions of the greatest power and responsibility were never brought to account for their crimes. Among these were the hated Uro, Ulysses Ruiz Ortiz, the governor of Oaxaca State, and this man, Sergio Segreste, the state public safety secretary. These officials were accused of abuse of authority, torture, and murder. All were subsequently declared exempt of all criminal charges by commissions that they themselves had been appointed to head. In effect, they found themselves innocent of all wrongdoing. That's it. That's the ultimate corrosive to the state, that kind of injustice and complete lack of any kind of accountability for the elites. In my experience, it was the same thing that tore my parents' family apart. That same kind of injustice and lack of accountability that ultimately proved to be stronger than even the bonds of blood. It's amazing how deeply ingrained the concept of justice is in the human psyche. Deprive a person of justice and they will strive to find fresh meaning and reason in their lives with all the determination that grief, rage, and suffering can bestow. It did not seem like the daughter of Emeterio Moreno Cruz would give up the fight for justice anytime soon. Every state throughout history has relied on the time-honored methods of mystery, miracle, and authority, otherwise more popularly known as patriotism and duty. These are constants. The real question facing the viability of any government is, how much will people take before they're no longer willing to salute back? In 1950, Mexico City had a population of 2.9 million people. By 2004, it had grown to over 22 million people. By mid-century, it is projected to swell to a population of over 50 million human beings. Though the effects of concentrations of large numbers of people have been known throughout history, these numbers are on a magnitude of order greater than anything seen before. Thus, it remains to be seen whether such gigantic concentrations of poverty will be environmentally or socially sustainable. The modern city of Mexico provides glimpses into a part of its reality through an infinite variety of human life, and confirms that it's only through a common sense of humanity that we can hope to begin to see another reality. But for the most part, Mexico City is neither gentle nor subtle, but crashes over you in a thundering wave of sound, sensation, and for me, a familiar but always shocked outrage at the dehumanization of hopeless poverty. I had tried by various means to spend time in the enormous slums, arguably the largest in the world, that surround the capital. I was interested in talking with some of Mexico City's poorest residents about whether they felt resentful about living in such squalor in close proximity to almost unimaginable wealth. Contrary to stereotypes, though, I didn't encounter any problems with poor people. Rather, it was the city's ubiquitous police who, buzzing like flies, continually harassed us, threatening and demanding bribes. In disgust, we finally left the city. Our plan was to climb Iztaccíhuatl, the nearly unpronounceable name of one of the two great volcanoes outside of Mexico City, the other being the slightly taller Popocatépetl, which, unfortunately, has been closed to climbers for a number of years due to ongoing volcanic activity. The summit of Ixta, as it's sometimes called, is at 17,160 feet. But because we didn't have ice climbing gear with us, I didn't think we'd push for the summit across an expanse of glacier without the proper equipment. Instead, I hoped to make it to the edge of the Ayaloco Glacier at about 16,500 feet. I wanted to see with my own eyes what story this ancient bed of ice would tell. So we set out for the base of the mountain.
This is crazy.
I know, it's such a big old pace.
There we go. So it's before dawn, and we're on a Mexican volcano outside of Mexico City, Ixtaccíhuatl, and we're at the trailhead, and we're gonna try and head up a little ways and see how it goes. So dawn should be happening fairly soon, and if you look just to my right, you can see Mexico City a little bit. I don't know if you'll be able to see it very well, but we're at the trailhead, which is, according to this, my GPS, we're at about 12,800 feet starting up. So a little bit tired, but that's the way it goes. So we're gonna head out. Here we go. We are at, according to this, my GPS, 15,365, 15,365 feet more or less. So I'm starting to feel the altitude a little bit. And yeah, it's, it hasn't been technical at all up Ixtaccíhuatl so far. The only thing I'm feeling at this point is just, the lack of oxygen, basically. And we're starting to hit some snow. It's getting muddy, or it did get muddy, and now we're getting like isolated patches of snow. Behind me is what's left of the Ayaloco Glacier. And the Ayaloco Glacier is interesting because, like many other glaciers on high mountains near the equator, these glaciers are not only receding at an incredible rate. By some accounts, this glacier is receding at 10 meters a year, or 30 feet, which is incredibly quick. At that rate, this glacier may disappear in as little as 5 to 10 years. These glaciers can give us key information, not only about current global climate change, or global warming as it's often known, but about the history of global temperatures and climate. And this has helped scientists tease out the difference between what man is actually contributing and what is the result of natural processes. This has been an incredibly politically loaded topic for a number of years, and there have been a number of interested parties, in particular the gas and oil industries, that have basically funded disinformation campaigns in order to protect their industry and their profits, which is just unconscionable when you think about the overall welfare, not only of these companies, but a greater welfare, that of nations and peoples and civilizations. From Iztaccíhuatl, we headed further south and east across the Isthmus of Tehuantepec and into the southern Mexican state of Tabasco. Though flooding had occurred in this part of the world before, deforestation and a general lack of planning and foresight succeeded in magnifying the scale of the disaster. Eventually, we learned that the flooding had displaced over 700,000 people, creating a disaster on a scale comparable to that of Hurricane Katrina. This driving's pretty intense, isn't it?
Yeah, that last bit where we were driving probably in 2 feet of water, I don't know, was intense. Like I could feel the car like having a little bit of trouble. And then there were people coming toward me and it was just, yeah, it was kind of... I just can picture, people on the news getting their car washed away. I'm just hoping that wouldn't be us. Okay, here we go again.
So we gotta, the road is washed out up ahead, but I'm gonna put it in 4-wheel drive and see if we can make it through here. So we'll see how this goes. There's a truck trying to do it. I don't think he can do it. He's getting stuck up in there. But we gotta put it in 4-wheel drive. And we'll see if we can do it. We're gonna put it in 4. I hope he doesn't tear this road all to hell. I don't think this is a good idea for him.
Can you go?
I can make it, I think. If I can get around him.
But you gotta go soon because before anybody else tries.
I know.
And before anybody else rips up the road.
Is he gonna go or is he gonna let me go? Are you gonna let me go, man? Because here we go. Hang on. Hang on tightly. So here we go.
Are you going this side?
Here we go. Hang on tight.
All right.
We made it. All right. Woo! We made it. All right. That gave me a little bit of just Just a little bit of an adrenaline rush there, because the road is, whenever you're driving on mountain roads and you drive over a washed out part, it's a little bit interesting. But we made that, so let's try it again. Here we go. These roads are just washing out everywhere. And this is the thing that's interesting, is with this whole global climate change thing, is that certain areas, I think, are going to bear the brunt of changing climate. And if you're in one of those areas where you're not really feeling it yet, or you're not feeling the extent of it, it's easy to have doubts about its reality. But there are certain areas, for example, the Arctic, where the polar ice caps are melting at a pretty alarming rate. They're feeling it there, but the thing is that, nobody lives there, or very few people live there. The other place that's going to feel it is going to be Central America, Latin America. And in large part, I think this is because of the increasing number and intensity of hurricanes and weather like this. And the effects are going to be a lot of what we've seen today. For example, damaged infrastructure, in particular roads, washed out, landslides, that kind of thing. Also, destroyed crops such as bananas. We saw flooded fields today. And then, of course, a lot of what can only be termed human misery. I mean, people who are losing their possessions, losing their homes. And we saw that today, too. We saw people carrying what they could salvage out of their flooded houses and putting them in the back of pickup trucks, and where, their TVs and chairs and dining room sets are getting rained on even more. And that's going to have some interesting repercussions for not only Latin America and the United States, but the world in general. In that areas like Chiapas, where we are right now, have never had a whole lot of political stability. I mean, the Zapatistas have been here, and they've been agitating for political change and more representation for poor people and indigenous people. And I think that with the kinds of changes that global climate change is going to bring, like this, and a weakening of the infrastructure, a weakening of the cohesiveness of the state and the services that hold the state together. In particular, here's another little washed out section. The ability to provide basic safety, as in police and fire protection, the ability to provide health services and universal education, the ability to provide safe drinking water and sanitation. All of these things are lacking right now in this part of the world. And if you have the additional stress of severe effects from global climate change, some of which we're witnessing today, it really brings into question just how much of the cohesiveness, the glue of society in the form of the state, can withstand. We stopped briefly at the Maya ruins of Tikal in Guatemala, which I had first visited in the late 80s, when this part of the world was still difficult to access and consumed by civil war. This time, since the situation was supposedly more peaceful, I wanted to head further into the jungle and off the beaten track to an even more remote set of ruins. So we just got stuck in that mud bog back there, and it was pretty tough to get out. It was a little bit scary because we're really in the middle of the P10 jungle. And we're only getting rear wheels spinning, which concerns me a little bit. I had it in 4-wheel drive, but we're only getting 2-wheel drive. But we're gonna go a little bit further. If there's a lot more mud, we might just have to wrap this up as it is. So we'll give it a try. This is a little stressful.
Yeah.
What do you think? Best?
I think, yeah. Oh, those tire tracks.
Yeah.
Nice job.
The rainy season was supposed to have stopped in October, and it's December 2nd right now, 2007. And it's rained every day for the last 2 weeks. So we're trying to drive to a set of Mayan ruins called Washaktun, which is supposedly only 23 kilometers away from Tikal. But the road we're on itself is not a terrible road. The problem is that it's extremely muddy, to the extent where we got stuck and I had to get out and push a little bit. And that makes the road a lot more difficult. But hopefully the ruins will be worth it, and we'll make it there in one piece, if not clean and dry.
So, are you gonna go left?
Yep.
Okay. Here we go.
We're gonna try it. Stay as left as possible.
Yeah, I think so.
Here we go. You ready?
Yep. Woohoo!
All right.
Nice job.
That wasn't so bad if you stay out of the steep or the deep part.
Yeah. Nice
I'm glad
job.
we made that.
Okay, well, so yeah, we're on our way to Washaktun from Tikal, and it is really muddy out here. The road is really muddy. Not out the whole thing, of course, but there are small parts that, like one time we went through a puddle that was probably 2 feet deep, 1.5 feet deep, and we got stuck. I was a little worried that we weren't going to get out, but finally, you know, we worked it out. So, so that was good. And it looks like maybe we're getting real close here. So I just hope we make it back from here. You know, it's probably going to rain tonight, I would imagine, since it's rained every night for the last 2 weeks. So hopefully the road doesn't get any worse, and hopefully we'll make it back. So we'll see. Oh, yeah. Here we are.
We made it. This is a Maya quarry at Washington, and Washington is about 23 kilometers away from Tikal, and it was one of the tributary states of Tikal. It was conquered and then was in an alliance with Tikal. And both Tikal and Washington went into a very precipitous decline around 900 AD. And this is an indication of the fact that, stonework was left basically half done. These huge blocks were partially carved out, you can see, and then just abandoned. As an indication of just how quickly these states went into decline, you can see some of these channels have been carved out here, there, and then back that way a little bit. Others, such as this one right here, were partially completed. They were begun, and the person had begun digging out this huge limestone block, and they got into exactly this point and stopped, and that was it. Kind of eerie to see that. Well, I guess 1,200 years ago, some hand stopped right here for what must have obviously been some very compelling reason. Basically, there are a number of theories about why these polities in the central lowlands went into decline. But a lot of it has to do with environmental degradation, and it must have been fairly widespread because we're not that close to Tikal, and it must have affected a very large area. Furthermore, there's indications that some of the stelae, for example, the rock pieces that have carvings and inscriptions on them, in which the Mayas referred to as stone trees, were destroyed intentionally. So there are marks of having been burned as well as having been ritually destroyed. So it would seem that when these polities, when these city-states went into decline, there was some strife that accompanied it. And there are some clues, indications that the people rose up against the elite, the economic and political elite of these polities, who had betrayed their role as intermediaries or intercessors with the gods. They had ceased to be able to provide the stability and the favor of the gods. And this was one of the factors that caused the upheaval and the decline of these central Mayan city-states. I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this, but right over my right shoulder is one of the pyramids that's unexcavated here at Washington. And this is a central plaza, and then directly across the plaza, behind me as well, is another pyramid, also unexcavated. But they really don't look like very much when they're in this state, just still overgrown by the jungle. But there's some amazing stuff here. And a lot of people live their lives here, and this was a obviously very important place to a lot of people a long time ago. Recent scholarship indicates that this and other sites declined in part because of environmental degradation that occurred as a result of their building activities. Most of these buildings were covered in lime. Lime is a substance that's derived from limestone, but it has to be burned, cooked first. And in order to cover these buildings with the whitewash and the varied colors that they used, they had to burn down tremendous numbers of trees. Thus, it was somewhat ironic that some of the very same things that made these kinds of civilizations so successful, their ability and prowess to build enormous buildings and ruins which still impress us today, were the same factors that helped lead to their decline. Namely, by commemorating great events, military victories, ascension of rulers, and that kind of thing, temples were dedicated and built, which in turn furthered the process of environmental degradation, which in turn also led towards the disintegration of the societies and their ultimate collapse. Is this a common sign in civilizations that are going through decline? That they adhere to a system of beliefs that had one time made them very successful, but have since become outmoded. And thus do these societies in decline end up accelerating their own decline through adherence to outmoded beliefs and systems of thought. Certainly in my trip through Central America and Mexico, I've witnessed a number of different signs that indicate that global climate change is in fact a reality, something that the majority of scientists, the vast majority of scientists, now agree to. But by far, the floods in the southern Mexican state of Tabasco showed the power and impact of global climate change and its ability to disrupt societies, economies, political systems, and the functioning of everyday life for everybody. Every civilization that has ever existed has risen and fallen. Where do we stand in our own civilization today? Are we on the rise and ascendancy? Are we at a peak? Or are we already seeing signs of a decline? Where do we stand in the great scheme of things, in the grand march of time? Do the dots connect in such a way that they indicate that not far off, in the not too distant future, lies on the horizon the coming of a perfect storm? It took about a week for us to drive from the jungles of Guatemala back to Colorado, and spending a week behind the wheel gives you plenty of time to think. Where do we stand? Everything I had seen over the last close to half a year all began to line up and point to an undeniable conclusion. From hurricanes to ancient mountaintop glaciers melting before my very eyes, to floods, to corrupt elites that brutalize their own citizens, to the hidden mysteries of abandoned jungle cities, it was becoming increasingly clear to me where we are all collectively heading. If we continue to let things go as they are, I was beginning to perceive that the 21st century was shaping up to see billions die in cataclysms that would make the butchery of the death camps and ethnic cleansing of the 20th century look like child's play in comparison. Outside my window, I could see helicopters swooping low over the border hunting human beings. some of whom no doubt were trying to escape a life of economic or environmental desperation. It seemed to be both an echo of some of the things already happening further south, as well as a harbinger of the crimes and abuses that invariably migrate home on the heels of collapsing empires. What do you do with this kind of information when you are increasingly convinced you are getting glimpses into the nightmare of a hellish future? In my country, the government was already claiming the absolute authority to have any of us hunted down and killed with merciless swiftness. Or perhaps even worse, indefinitely thrown into the living death of a military prison cell without charge, without trial, and without hope.
Our streets! Our streets! Our streets! Our streets! Our streets! Our streets! Our streets!
We say no to your bullshit democracy! Fuck that! We ain't this is what fucking happens! Fuck this bullshit
Thank you for our rights. Thank you for our right to free speech. Thank you for our right to protest in the streets. Thank you for taking it away from us by shooting us with rubber bullets and spraying us with fucking pepper spray, you pieces of shit. You animals.
Who's your leader?
The whole world's watching. Hey, don't move the press out. We can't have a media blackout. Hey, got metal. Stand back up.
You must leave the immediate vicinity. If you remain in this immediate vicinity, you will be in violation of the Pennsylvania Crimes Code. By order of the City of Pittsburgh Chief Police, I hereby declare this to be an unlawful course. You must leave the immediate vicinity. If you remain in this immediate vicinity, you will be in violation of the Pennsylvania Crimes Code. No matter what your purpose is, you must leave. If you do not disperse, you may be arrested and or subject to other police action. Other police action may include actual physical removal of injury to those who remain. Por orden del jefe de policías de la ciudad de Pittsburgh, esta asamblea ha sido declarada.
That's tear gas.
By order of the City of Pittsburgh Chief Police, I hereby declare this to be an unlawful assembly. I order all those assembled to immediately disperse. You must leave the immediate vicinity. If you remain in this immediate vicinity, you will be in.
Let's go!
I'm getting some tear gas here.
Por orden del jefe de policías de la ciudad de Pittsburgh. Esta asamblea.
You see, here comes this thing. They're bringing it back up. Whenever.
By order of the City of Pittsburgh Chief Police, I hereby declare this to be an unlawful assembly. I order all those assembled to immediately disperse. By order of the City of Pittsburgh Chief Police, I hereby declare this to be an unlawful assembly. I order all those assembled to immediately disperse. You must leave the immediate vicinity. If you remain in this immediate vicinity, you will be in violation of the Pennsylvania Crimes Code, no matter what your purpose is. You must leave. If you do not disperse, you may be arrested and or subject to other police action. Other police action may include actual physical removal, the use of riot control agents and or less lethal munitions.
They were over there. There you go.
Okay.
On the sidewalk!
Hey, who robbed the Pittsburgh Police Pension Fund blind? It wasn't us, it was Wall Street executives. And who's backing up the Wall Street executives? The finance ministers inside the G20. They're the people who robbed your pension plan. They're the reason that your kids aren't going to be able to go to college. They're the reason that you're not going to be able to provide a better life for your kids than you were able to provide for yourself. That's the American dream. We are not enemies of the American dream. The G20 ministers are the enemy of the American dream because they stole your pension fund. They also foreclosed on the homes of many of your neighbors. Police budgets are about to be slashed. Hello? In the next 5 years, where's the money going to come from? Some of you in this line will be laid off 1 year from today. And then you're going to be on our side of the lines when you're fighting to get back your house and your health insurance and your job. Remember that.
Let us go! 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 Let us go!
How you doing work over there?